Welcome to Downloaded, the show where we gather the most opinionated voices in the tech field today and focus that energy on the stories impacting the tech world. I am your host, Roger Chang, filling in for Jim Louderback, CEO. I don't actually know where he is today, so I'm filling in. But joining me today is former CTO of Revision 3, Rob DeMillo, and next to him, my best friend and the man who introduced me to Scientology, Justin Severinsen.
There's a story I have to hear about this.
It's a pretty.
I have to hear it too.
It's a pretty amazing story. I don't know. I haven't actually quite finished that story yet. I'll let you know when I do.
Oh no.
But speaking of stories, one of the big stories of the week was Valve's announcement over three things: Steam OS, their Linux-based tailored OS aimed at gaming and basic living room entertainment, and as well as Steam Machine and their newly announced Steam controller, which I unabashedly referred to it as some sort of massaging device for the male anatomy. Let me ask you guys this. Is this even worth doing on Valve's part? Is this really something that's going to take off? The combination of Steam OS, Steambox, Steam Machine, whatever that might be, as well as this newfangled touch controller.
So Gabe Newell is not an idiot. I mean, he's one of the smarter guys in gaming from the creation of games just in general. His eye on the market is pretty spot on, and he seems to have this kind of natural tendency to kind of find niches and take them over. So, I'll leave it up to him to determine whether or not there's a market for it. Am I personally excited about it? I am actually. I'm a Steam user myself. I don't use it as much as I should because I've sort of gravitated towards gaming consoles and I don't do the PC downloads anymore. So my affiliation with Steam has gotten less and less. So if he can bring that to a console version that I can use in my living room, yeah.
But isn't that a? I mean, that's not an insignificant leap to move from what essentially is digital distribution to becoming essentially a vertically integrated kind of business where you own the hardware, you run the software side of things, and then also being sort of a publisher. I mean, aren't there a whole?
Well, he's already been a publisher. I mean, Steam is a publisher.
But not for their specific hardware. I mean, they talk, especially with Steam Machine, they've talked about using a streaming service to kind of allow you backward compatibility with software games that aren't compatible with the Steam Machine, in much the same way that Gaikai was purchased by Sony to kind of do the same thing for backward compatibility on the PS4. I mean, it's a big bite. I honestly don't think. I'm honestly 50-50 on it right now. I mean, Justin, what do you think? I mean, I know you're a big console gamer.
Yeah,
Is this something you would say, hey, I'm going to spend money on it. I want to see what it's all about. Or is it just like, you know what, it's going to be another Ouya. It's going to be a great niche item for a lot of people who might be drawn to that kind of genre of service or whatever. But I mean, nothing that you would say compete with like, a AAA title on a PS4 or Xbox One.
Well, the PS4 and Xbox One both have a lot of capabilities that are moving closer towards what people use PCs for gaming. Mm-hmm. They have Twitch integration, which is a huge thing. And you see a lot of people wanting to hook their PCs up to their TV to play their Steam games like on Twitch or stream them. So I think it's really a natural evolution of where Steam is now. And it almost seems like they're trying to do something to, maybe there are people who are considering switching to consoles, PS4, Xbox One, because they do more of what they want to do. This is a way for Valve to keep them in the Steam ecosystem, but move with them to the living room.
And I think it's a good idea for partners of third-party games, right? They've got a distribution channel now that's not just confined to Microsoft or Sony.
Right.
They now have another way to go. I mean, you brought up Ouya, whatever.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
So I bought one. I did the Kickstarter thing, and I got one, and it's an unmitigated disaster. And part of the reason for that is there is, and I wrote an article about this a couple of years ago. There's a delineation between games. There's this whole school of thought that mobile is taking over gaming, and mobile phone gaming is going to surpass consoles. They're two different audiences.
Absolutely.
Right? And so Ouya came in with this kind of weird Frankenstein, not quite 8-bit games, but basically mobile games projected up on your 60-inch television set, and it's ridiculous, right? It doesn't fit any niche at all. When I do my console gamings, it's me, a beer, and a controller, and I want the high-powered graphic engines. I want those physics engines. I want all that stuff running, looking great. When I'm on my mobile, I'm at an airport. I'm screwing around in a hotel room, that kind of thing, right? It's a different market space. So along comes Steam, which is the first legitimate third gaming station that has a chance of surviving.
Now let me ask you this. Let me turn the question around. What do you see as the biggest hurdle for Steam right now? Is it technical? Is it creating, building the APIs so developers can take advantage or integrate with the hardware instead of having to write everything from scratch? Or is it trying to get the mind share of those gamers out there and kind of convince them, yeah, this is a legitimate gaming device. This is something that you will pay top dollar for, and this is something you'll scream at mommy and daddy to go buy you during when Christmas rolls around.
I picked choice B.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, the people who are not already playing PC games on Steam or otherwise are not doing it for a reason. They prefer the console experience. Maybe they're not aware of the PC side of things. So this, to them, unheard of party coming in and saying, no, this is a good experience. We have games too. Trying to get that is going to be difficult for them.
Are you going to try Steam OS?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Will you?
I'll give it a shot.
I got an extra box. I can break it. It won't matter too much to me. But I mean, do you think in about 5 years, do you think we'll be, if we're still here, in 5 years, sitting down talking and saying, yeah, remember the time when Xbox and PlayStation were just the names to have and they all kind of fell out, kind of like the 2600, a ColecoVision, all those things. Do you think Steam OS will be as big in 5 years as you guys, as Gabe hopes it will?
It's tough to say. I don't necessarily think that Sony and Microsoft or Nintendo are necessarily going to go anywhere. They're going to change.
Seriously, you don't think Nintendo's going to go? I honestly believe that company.
From the living room, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
All right, I'll give you that.
Well, I think we'll talk a little bit more about that. But I mean, even when Xbox One was announced, Microsoft wanted to do a lot of stuff that was kind of scary for a lot of people with digital distribution and ownership. They're already thinking 5-10 years out. They've got a plan. The landscape's going to look very different then. Is SteamOS going to be a part of it? Like you said, Gabe Newell's a smart guy. I think he knows what's coming, and I think that they're building this service to weather that storm.
And in the case of both Microsoft and Sony, they're not just banking on games, right? They're considering those things to be media-centric devices for video playback, audio playback, and gaming is another thing that they do. Whereas Steam has a very loyal audience. They have a very active ecosystem, and they are focusing purely on the gaming experience. And I think that might give them enough of an edge to kind of shove their way in there. Will they be number 1 or 2? No, probably not. But will they be part of the big 3? Yeah.
Do you think the hardware will be commoditized enough that you could conceivably see a Steam OS enabled TV, so you can skip buying the box separately in the same way you see Netflix?
Not a fan of that. Not a fan of anything built into the television set. So like this whole, this gets into another topic, but this whole we're going to converge on one device thing. We diverged from that for a reason, right? Like, television sets are expensive commodities even today. Like, even if you're spending $700 for your TV set, it would still be something that you would have to replace if that thing that just got built into it gets replaced by something else, right? So having a breakout box or a box that is separate that you can evolve beyond your television set and do it for anywhere from free to $200, I think that's probably a better bet.
All right, well, I guess we should move on to the next story. Popular Science turns off comments. This is actually something that got me going because I thought it was really, really interesting because Popular Science, if anyone's not familiar with it, is a magazine dedicated to kind of doling out science on a monthly basis, but in a way that is accessible by a wide majority of people. Now, they have made the decision to turn off comments associated with those stories on their online content. Now, personally, I don't believe it's such a hot idea for a number of philosophical and perhaps social reasons. But let me ask you, Justin. Do you think, and their reason is this, is that they do not want stories to be blemished in any kind of way or have kind of people's vision of it kind of turned because of negative comments that follow that story. I mean, do you buy that as a legitimate reason? They pointed to research that said, people's view of science does kind of change after they read, a bunch of negative comments. Do you think that is kind of a confirmation bias where people are just basically looking for data that supports their beliefs? Or do you think it's an actual case of, people just being easily swayed?
I think it's definitely people being, well, maybe not definitely. I think it's a combination of both. I think that their reasons for turning off the comments are kind of silly. I actually do like it for a completely separate reason, is that it takes the conversation into a different space. You read an article, you want to discuss it with somebody, you're not getting that sort of release by being able to comment on the story. You're going to turn to other channels like Facebook, Twitter, your friends, and say, hey, here's the story, let's talk about it. And I think that's where you're going to get more legitimate discussion rather than just, some random...
What's wrong with moderation? Like moderating the forums?
I don't think there's anything wrong with it, but one of the things that they said is that cost them a lot of money.
So I mean, this is what I was thinking. Maybe it's more a cost issue than anything else, but they want to spin. And this is the thing.
I'm sure it is.
Well, the thing that bothers me about the whole thing is that their reasoning, at least in my mind, is very specious. I mean, like to say that comments that follow a story negatively affect the story. Maybe, but I think it might partially be the way the story's written. If it's not laid out in a very compelling way for people to kind of make up their mind on it, I think you come up with a
look. That's an idiotic reason, and it doesn't cost a lot to moderate a forum. A, and B, Google just dealt with this with YouTube. They moved to G+, which removes anonymity, and when you remove anonymity, people think about what they're writing, right? They don't do the racist comments. They don't do the jackass 14-year-old boy comments, and it costs Google nothing to do that, right? Just flip to G+. Popular Science could have done the same thing. They could have gone with G+ or Facebook or some sort of unified login system that allowed the anonymity to get removed, and then that problem goes away. The problem I have with this, I grew up a scientist. My degrees are in science. I did science for a number of years before moving into tech. Science in its most perfect form is self-correcting. The idea of science is that you welcome, not shun, contrary thought, right? And anyone that can pop a hole in the bubble of the model that you have just created deserves to be heard.
That's a good point.
Right? And what popular science basically has done is they've cut off public discourse. They've said, no, this is what our writers are saying, as though it was handed down from a tablet from God, and you cannot disagree with this because it will distract from the article. It's good that it distracts from the article. That's part of what this is all about. That's part of what the scientific experience is, to have an open public debate.
Now, one of the points that she made, the writer Susan LeBaer wrote was basically a quote: "A politically motivated, decades-long war on expertise has eroded popular consensus on a wide variety of scientifically validated topics." Now, let me ask you, Rob, what does she mean by eroded the popular consensus? The way I understood it, at least in scientific literature, you have data that proves a theorem or a theory, valid or not. I mean, it's not a consensual thing where everyone says, yeah, I think I agree with this data set. How many say aye and how many say nay, and that's how you kind of decide whether or not it's valid or not. I mean, isn't that sort of contrary to the whole scientific method?
Have we got 3 hours to have this conversation? Because this is like a hot button topic for me.
Beer is only half done.
So part of the training that you get in science, and it's almost sort of true in science writing, but it's not quite as strict, is that there is no certainty, right? You're never 100% certain of anything that you do, any model that you posit, any ideas that you come up with, any observational evidence that you make, any experimentations. There's always room for uncertainty. That's just part of the scientific method, and it's a good process. What the mainstream public seizes on, what the religious right seizes on, and what a bunch of people that don't have, not to be rude, but disciplined thought processes around like critical thought and critical reasoning, is, you're not 100% certain, therefore it's not true. So they take that 0.0001% and they exploit it. And the science community is not used to that sort of rabble-rousing, biased reasoning, what have you. What needs to change is the PR around science and the people that promote science in a way that is as aggressive as the people coming in, right? They need to know to learn how to protect their back door. And they have to do it through arguments that are logical, are not emotional, are rational, and not rooted in thought and rooted in theory, and bring the conversation to that level, not to just kind of roll over on their back, right? And what popular science is doing by doing this is they are presenting the opinion, which by the way is justified, to the public media that science can't handle it. Scientists cannot handle criticism.
I don't want to kind of wander off too far the topic, but I mean, isn't this just kind of what's happening in general with discourse in society?
Yeah,
I mean, we've trivialized it. We've kind of taken out the nuance. We've taken out the subtlety. We've taken out the sophistication, and all we have are sound bites. Pundits who do nothing but yell at each other.
140 characters.
Yeah, and then we do something asinine like split the country into two colors because frankly that's all there is, right? Just a blue and a red. Yeah. I mean, it's maddening because especially things like, for example, the recent IPCC report on global warming, where they conceded that the warming that they thought would happen, or at least the amount that they anticipated 5 years ago hasn't happened, I think is a failure on the part of the original report where a lot of things were potentially exaggerated in order to kind of motivate people to action, but having having it literally backfire because people will point out, it's like, look, all the stuff you said that was going to happen isn't going to happen, it's not happening. Himalayas still have glaciers and snow on it, not as much as before, but they're still there. We got winter snow coming down in our country. You said it was going to be a desert, in 5 to 6 years' time. I mean, is it just more of a sociological issue of us learning how to basically interact with people who disagree with us or don't share our same viewpoints? I mean, am I wrong here?
How far do you guys want me to go down this rabbit hole?
Well,
I happily go there with a flashlight and a torch and the whole thing.
I'm sure, like,
I agree with him now.
You know? Yeah.
There's an aspect to it that I appreciate, but with that perspective, like you're absolutely right. Everything you said. You'll
get your check in the morning. I appreciate that. There is a tendency, and I think it's brought on by the 140 character culture, to swallow everything whole and believe nonsense in this country. And it's spreading to the rest of the world.
Like mermaids.
Exactly. So, it is easier to believe in, fairies and mystical reasons for things than it is to spend the time and sit down and rationally think out why things are occurring the way they are. And so, because of that, there's far more people that can say, see, global warming is wrong because of this one study, right? As opposed to saying, look, that particular study was taking into account a bunch of things that nobody else took into account, and they were wrong in some of their models. And there are logistical and rational comments to make about what just happened, right? And again, I go back to science is self-correcting. You should look at that and say, you know what, the experimental evidence did not bear out the theoretical model. Therefore, we thought something wrong.
But the people who disagreed with it in the first place are not going to consider those things.
Of course they're not.
They're going to say, see, we knew it was wrong.
That's right.
You're wrong.
That's right.
Fixing that is a much larger problem.
It is, and that devolves down to fixing the educational system, and it devolves down to where the priorities are put. It's a whole conversation.
This is a whole documentary that we can't get into. But speaking of things that have focused on specious logic, Pogue, as we all know, is a writer for the New York Times on technology, and he recently weighed in on the whole iPhone 5S finger scanner was hacked story, and he's like, in the end, it's really not such a big deal. I mean, they had to go through a lot of hurdles and a lot of processes in order to get that thumbprint or fingerprint to work on the phone, and even then, it's not a direct way to get into your phone because a password prompt, if you set it for 48 hours, will come up every 48 hours telling you to put in your password, and you'll be locked down. You need 5 tries. So in the end, it's really not a big issue. I don't see why people are making a big deal. Agree, disagree?
I believe something that he said. It's not a security feature. It's a feature of convenience. The problem with that is that they are touting it as a security feature.
This is the thing. Security and convenience are one of those two things that will never meet.
No.
The more you want something to be convenient, the more insecure you make it because you're essentially trying to reduce the number of barriers to access whatever, be it your money, your data, whatever. But the whole point of security is to make it difficult for someone who isn't, you to surreptitiously gain access. So you're looking at me like I'm wrong.
No, I'm looking. I'm like the whole Apple conversation drives me crazy because people proven over and over again that biometric feedback for security is just not a great idea. Android had the face thing, and you just put a picture up and you're in. And there's this whole thing about like how they hacked the fingerprint identification. You can do that with baking powder and a piece of tape. You can fake the biometric, and there's nothing better than a password. There's nothing better than a swipe block, that sort of thing. And so the use of biometric data for security purposes on something as ubiquitous as a phone is insane. It's cute, but it's just who cares? Like, why would you do that? And by the way, don't use it. Like on the iPhone, you cannot use it. You can use other security methods that make more sense.
On the flip side, if my phone gets stolen out of my hands walking down the streets of San Francisco, I'm not really that concerned that guy is going to go through those steps to get into my phone.
I agree with you. Yep.
In that circumstance, it works exactly how it is intended. Mm-hmm. As long as you keep that perspective in mind and you're not keeping highly classified information and you're a public figure, like that's where that's not going to work.
But so does the Android face thing, right? Like nobody's going to have a picture of me if I lose my phone in a bar. Nobody can get into it either, right? So,
although that is a little easier to get around than
I guess that's probably true. Yeah, I guess that's probably
true. Hold
on,
let me take your picture as I steal your phone from you. The bigger question I think in all of this is Pogue just way too much of an Apple fanboy to kind of see clearly past the. I understand that it isn't something that will be an immediate risk. If I lose my house keys out in the streets, I'm not going to worry about someone suddenly that night trying to go through my house and rummage everying because there's a bunch of houses and not all the keys work.
I'm sorry about that, by the way. I'll give them back later.
I have insurance for a reason. But I think this actually goes back to a little bit of the whole popular science thing. It's like sometimes we're so clouded by our fanaticism, and I will use the word fanaticism, at least with Pogue, when it comes to this stuff, that it's really easy to dismiss things that don't necessarily agree with your argument, and then you kind of brush aside because he's almost dismissive. Not quite there, but he's very close to being dismissive to a lot of these concerns. And I think it's like at least pretend that that's something that that should be. Granted, you cannot use the machine or the phone immediately, or you should be able to once you use the. You copy the finger. But even having access to little bits of data could be harmful, if not everything.
Yes, saying that's not a problem at all is being disingenuous.
Yes,
like is it a cool feature? Is it convenient? Yeah. Is it a problem that it's being touted as a security feature and that it can be broken? Yes. I think that not accepting that argument because it doesn't fit the narrative or the reality that you've constructed is also a problem.
Yeah, I agree with you. Lord knows, I am not in the Apple camp by any stretch of the imagination, but there's a lot of features on this phone that are not as sexy, that are far more interesting. The multiple network pathway, for instance, is a great concept, great feature that's built into iOS 7. As is, people are making fun of it, but the 64-bit chip, it's going to bear fruit in a few years. I think it's a great idea. The fingerprint thing is just a wonky, pretty little thing that people like to point out.
Yeah, it's a marketing thing.
It's a marketing thing.
It's like, hey, check this out. This is cool.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's cool. It's not necessarily useful in terms of security.
That's
right. All right. Well, speaking of things that are cool but may have might be slightly useful. potentially useful is the new Mayday button on Amazon's all-new Kindle Fire HDX. Rob, you know a lot about Mayday. Can you?
I do. I have to watch myself.
This is why I brought you on.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. So I have been looking into technologies recently that allow you to do this kind of product. So I think it's tremendous.
Well, what is Mayday for people?
For people who don't know what it is, if you buy one of the new Kindles, and I'm not sure if it retrofits to the old Kindles, I don't believe that it does. If you get into trouble with anything on your Amazon purchase or your Amazon whatever, you punch a button, a Mayday button, and within a few seconds you get a video chat connection with a customer service representative. And that customer service representative will walk you through whatever it is that you're doing. And they're aware of the state that your tablet is in, and they're aware of what you're trying to do, and they will walk you through the process. It is tremendous. There's a lot of research that shows that as you increase the bandwidth to customer service representation, user engagement and user satisfaction goes way up. So, if text chat is the worst, and then VoIP, and then, video is obviously the best. So the fact that this is actually baked into the tablet as part of the OS, it's a potentially game-changing idea.
Now, it'd be interesting if it's one of those things where they move it just off that device, but offer it for other. Can you imagine if you got not an Amazon branded TV, but an Amazon supported TV, and you have a problem, you hit that one Amazon button on your remote, and you get a little picture of the tech support person saying, plug it in here, and then just have little LED lights around the port that light up. It's like, plug it into the light that has, that's lit green on the back of your TV.
Absolutely.
You plug it there. It'd be perfect, because that would help people like my dad that have to, troubleshoot for 60 to 90 minutes on the phone how to scan new channels on his HDTV. While I look through the PDF of the the TV online, it's like, all right, hit the button. You should see this. Move on. It would make things so much simpler. I mean, it's one of those things that doesn't seem like a big deal on the face of it, but actually, if you think about it, it's pretty big.
Well, one of the things that people say is so great about Apple, I'll bring them back into the conversation.
Apple.
Well, hang on, stick with me, is that a lot of people say, well, you can just go to an Apple store and they'll help you out with anything that you need help with, whether it's picking out a device, buying something, whatever you want to do. Amazon doesn't have physical locations, that's its whole thing. This is basically a porthole into a Amazon store. You have a question about something is wrong with your purchase, anything you need, there's somebody there to help you, and you don't have to go anywhere. This is incredible.
That last part is the big one, because people, the usage model of Amazon products is different than the usage model of perhaps an Apple product, right? You were on the couch, you're trying to watch Breaking Bad, and you want to find out why you can't, right? You're not going to make an appointment and go in and whatever. Whereas opposed to Apple, it's like your laptop needs repair, or you got a problem with your laptop, so you go in.
Let me ask you this. With all the kind of pushback over the past decade over outsourcing and tech support in far-flung countries where English isn't the first language,
hello, my name is Steve.
Do you see the failing being where they set up this incredible system that enables them to do that, but then they staff it with people that aren't able to kind of follow through on
I recuse myself from this conversation.
Well, my biggest question when I read it, coming from somebody who thinks about these things for a living, is how are they going to scale this effectively? I'm sure they thought about it. I'm sure they have answers for it, but I'm really interested to know the details of how that's going to work longer term.
I'll confess, when I had DSL and it was really flaky in my area because of the connection was always physically underwater, I would always lie and say, no, I don't have a PC, I have a Mac, because they would automatically transfer me to a service support center in Oklahoma. And then it would solve my issue in like a tenth the time. I wouldn't have to go through, because for a lot of those outsourced support centers, they have a giant binder of steps that they go through. Sure. Step 1, step 2, and so you have to do that entire process before it's like, okay, we'll tell them to reboot it from our end, and it should solve your problem.
Look, Amazon is really good at location-based solutions to problems, right? So they know where you are, they know what your native language is. I would assume, I do not know, that the back end of Amazon, they are coordinating the customer service person that is talking with you with your location and your need.
Well, and if this is a big deal, not just because it's going to solve problems, but this is also a marketing thing. It's a way
Yeah.
to drive engagement. They're not going to let this service not be the best they can make it.
Final question on this Amazon topic before we move over. Amazon Airlines, yes or no?
What?
No?
Just like
Just,
Yeah.
I just
Like,
just,
like
just
an
so-
airline, an Amazon airline. Would you fly on
Is
an
it-
Amazon airline?
Is this a
Like
thing?
Virgin?
Or are you
I'm
just
just
making
putting
this
it
up?
out there. Would you? Would you step on a board a plane with a giant smiley swish on
No.
the wing?
free shipping?
Yeah.
That would be good. If you got free shipping on your luggage, that would be awesome.
That's all they have to do.
So Amazon and physical locations. I just had one of the worst service experiences I have had with Amazon in 15 years of dealing with them, with the Amazon locker. It was an absolute unmitigated disaster. So I don't want to get in a plane with these people. But I will absolutely buy any digital content and everything else.
Well, can you imagine they could totally fill in, if they have so many vacant seats, take out the seats and they could just store, cargo, a bunch of Amazon boxes in it. Be great. No?
There was an episode of the Beverly Hillbillies like this, I think.
All right. Next story. Bill Gates admits to Ctrl+Alt+Delete was a mistake and he blames IBM. Now, I find this a little surprising in that he didn't admit to more mistakes. One of them is, how can such a rich guy have such a bad haircut? I don't get that.
And sweaters.
But the co-founder of Microsoft basically said that using the Ctrl+Delete key as a combination to log into your PC was a mistake. And really, the story isn't that it was a Ctrl+Delete. It was the fact that he kind of did a mea culpa, sort of, in an interview at Harvard. In your estimations, what else should he fess up for screwing up over the past, 3 decades?
Well, before we get into that, I do want to comment on the haircut because we know that traditionally Microsoft has not been as concerned with aesthetics as Apple. So
That's true. That's true.
that comes from the heart.
Like pooping on Bill Gates is a fun thing to do, but honestly, nobody wants to have this conversation, but they were right more than they were wrong, right? The whole thing with Ctrl+Alt+Delete, he was blaming the keyboard manufacturer because at that time nobody had heard of specialized keys or centralized keys. So he wanted to have a power on button on the keyboard, and nobody wanted to do it. So he went with Ctrl+Alt+Delete.
So Steve did it with the Mac.
Well, it's because Steve controlled everything from he controls everything from the pipe all the way
did.
down to the so he did. Now he does not.
Or does he?
Or does he? Yeah, that's still out for debate.
Well,
But we were talking about unpopular science, but they shut us down, so we didn't.
I mean,
So other things that they have missed. If you want to talk about things that Microsoft have missed, mobile was a crime against humanity. The fact that they missed that whole boat when they had a leg up, and they were involved in HP with the PDAs and doing. Personal data assistance for those of you like under 30, not public displays of affection. They missed. They had a start. They had a head start there, and they just kind of blew it because they were forcing their model on people.
I mean, let's web TV. Was web TV something that they made money off?
No, they didn't. But that was a precursor to a lot of things. So I'm gonna give them that
Okay. What about Zune?
one. Zune is what you're seeing now on Windows 8.
Right.
Zune was a beautiful piece of hardware. Microsoft has never been able to market themselves out of a paper bag. And I catch crap for this every time I bring this up. The original Zune and the ones that came after it was gorgeous.
So let me ask-
gorgeous.
So
It
let me
worked
ask you
very,
this
very well.
then: was the Xbox, or at least the Xbox, part of their business, kind of the exception to the rule? I mean, it did
Yeah.
relatively well. In fact, the 360, at least in the U.S.,
Which links back to the Steam conversation, right? That the gamers are a tenacious bunch, and they saw something they liked and they latched onto it, and regardless of the fact it was Microsoft or not, they stuck with it, and it became what you're seeing now.
One of the things that I enjoy saying that I catch a lot of crap for is that the Xbox was very successful, but it felt like the most Apple-like thing Microsoft has ever done, in that it's a consistent experience. It was marketed very well. They don't do that with really anything else that they do.
But that leads to the bigger question: why can't they? I mean, they've obviously can do it because they've demonstrated it. But why is it so difficult? Is it because the company's so broad? It's just that there's so many different wings of the company that don't necessarily interface with each other, or is it just kind of having the right people in the right positions in order to kind of kickstart it or kick it to kick it into gear?
I think it's a couple of different things. My perception is that the reasons that they get into those spaces, they didn't get into video games to directly necessarily challenge Sony. People used PCs for gaming. They had this idea for a console experience. They got into it for the right reasons. I think things like the Zune. The Zune was a direct response to the iPod.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's a lot of maybe feeling on the PC side of things, on the side of things that's opposing Apple, that prevents them from forging ahead with maybe more riskier ideas like Xbox.
I mean,
I think that's a reasonable thing. I've spoken about this before on the show. There's a concept that was put forward in the 50s called groupthink. And the idea of groupthink is that any decision-making process in an enclosed group immediately discounts contradictory information from outside the group. It's called in-group and out-group thinking. And I think Microsoft has fallen victim to that fairly significantly. They've been around for so long. They have this kind of insular staff and insular campus environment that they believe that they have a good firm handle on what's going on in the outside world and how to play in that space, and they don't.
Then what would you consider the remedy at that point in time? Would it be like a new CEO?
They have an opportunity now. I mean, now that Ballmer stepped out of the way, they have an opportunity to bring in a new CEO. They're not going to, right? It's going to wind up being
Some weird committee.
ELUP. No, it's going to wind up.
That's right. From
yeah, or they'll promote from within or what have you. They're not going to use this as an opportunity to kind of change the flavor of the company, which I think is probably a mistake.
I don't think that they see a problem with it.
Well, that's the group thing. That's groupthink, yeah. They don't see a problem with it. They think, well, we've got these great people, which they do, and we've got these really bright people, which they do. Therefore, we will promote from within, or we'll take the Nokia dude, or we'll do whatever we need to do to get somebody in here who understands the Microsoft way, and that's the problem.
Right.
All right. Well, speaking of groupthink and companies that seem to wallow in it, EA has a quote: "We asked for too much time and too much skill and too much money." Basically, EA's Richard Hillman has said that the console industry has demanded too much from the consumer, with players turning to innovation in the mobile space for their gaming entertainment. Where once young players learned from video games designed by Miyamoto, they now pick up lessons and play from the touchscreens of iOS devices. EA is like another company that everyone loves to beat up on, especially in the video gaming space, because they are one of the biggest providers of sequelitis. I mean, we have a popular game, let's kick out 10, 20 iterations of it each year. But especially as it applies to video game, I mean, that there is kind of, at least for me, there's a feeling that a lot of the games just kind of look and feel the same. There isn't really that much in the way of truly innovative. And I don't mean hey, you can jump back in time a few seconds and that's really cool. But I mean something that isn't revolve around a first-person shooter, a platformer, or something else you've seen.
The problem is that games cost too much to make now.
No, but isn't that part of the problem though?
It is part of the problem.
Millions, in some cases, hundreds of millions of dollars invested, like GTA 5. I mean, you can't but help go with the safest bet, because everyone who's dumped money into it, it's like, you know what? I've written you a check for $2 million. I want to see something for it besides a smile on a bunch of gamers' faces.
No, you're exactly right. Because games cost so much to make and to finance, they aren't willing to take risks because they need to get the return on their investment. That's why you see GTA 5 is essentially like GTA 4, but it looks a little better and maybe with a bit more misogyny, if you can believe it. That's why you see Call of Duty is the same thing.
With a dog.
With a dog. Call of Duty with a dog. It's basically the same thing. As a result, games cost more money, game consoles cost more money. It's harder for people to get into that. Whereas with mobile, games don't cost a lot of money to make. They don't look like they do on console, but people don't necessarily seem to care as much
they look
about
like
that.
crap too. I mean, this is the Hollywood thing. So and it's no coincidence that EA is down in LA, right? So they put all this money into it. The returns when they succeed are ginormous. So yes, they continue to recycle. On the other hand, creating a game that has a user experience to get you closer to that virtual reality world, it takes a lot of money, and making game engines that do logic in ways that you would expect real people to do for the computer generated characters, all that stuff is very, very expensive, and the graphics are very expensive. So yes, so you do have this, it goes back to the dichotomy we were talking about earlier, where you do have this console gaming world and you've got this mobile world where the games are they're fine. they're penny arcade games as opposed to real games. So you guys are both right. I mean, the solution would be for somebody with a lot of money to come in and really create something brand new and interesting and different.
Like House of Cards or Orange is the New Black.
Or in the gaming world, Gabe.
Potentially. I mean, it always follows that, the more invested interest you have in something, I mean, the more people you have to please. I mean, it's one reason why, venture capitalists can be both the savior and the bane of your company. I mean, yeah, they're going to help you out, but at the same time, you got a new leash, or in some cases, a bunch of leashes. I mean, realistically, especially with that much money, do you see a period of time or someone that will essentially say, I mean, Gabe included, break it down just like, hey, you know what we need are some very simple but very addictive games, whether it's like a desktop tower defense style game or something like Braid or something from like an indie artist that we can kind of pump up and then throw millions of dollars at and then start the whole ball rolling again.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you mentioned Braid because Braid was one of my favorite games of the year it came out, which I think was 2008, 2009.
Something like that.
Something like that. That was a phenomenal game. It didn't have realistic graphics or realistic physics or any of that, but it didn't need to. But it's hard to market stuff like that. And instead, people see GTA and Call of Duty and they know what to expect. Like, I think gaming is very different now than it was 10, 15 years ago, where you have people who would never have picked up a controller back then, but they're playing Madden and Call of Duty. I love to use the term bro, but it's kind of those, people.
The broing of the gamer set.
And this was a problem when Ken Levine was doing BioShock Infinite, making the sequel to BioShock, which was fantastic. With BioShock Infinite, he's said, in order to tell the story that I wanted to tell with the budget that required it, I needed to make a first-person shooter because that's what sells. Like, that's how he was able to get the money. And I think that that's really unfortunate. And I think we're looking at, maybe not anytime soon, and I don't want to say like, oh, another video game crash, but I think we're going to reach a point in time where the landscape is, I hope, going to look very different.
Well, hopefully that will be soon because we're all out of time on this episode. And I am sad to say that this will be our final episode of Downloaded. I'm actually I'm incredibly ecstatic that I have both Rob and Justin here joining me today. And it's
because we're really cool.
It was really
the
cool.
all-star team.
Listen,
we are. Yeah.
you drink. One of you drinks, and you're a former scientist.
I finished
and
this entire glass of water.
And you worked at NASA.
I did.
He worked at NASA. I don't know what you did, but you worked at NASA, and that's like cool cred already.
Urinal cakes need to be changed, man.
I am wearing a tie, however.
That's
so
true. He is wearing a tie.
But see, that's what NASA does to you. You're like, you're top of the heap. It's like, I don't need a tie.
It bespeaks. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah.
But please, if you have any comments, suggestions, or comments about this episode, please leave them below. I'd like to thank all of you for watching, staying with us for the 44 episodes. Wow, 44 episodes.
Yeah, almost made it to 50.
I was handed the show back in November of last year.
It's a good run.
It is a good run. I've outlasted many sitcoms.
You have, fortunately.
I think I've outlasted a couple of networks too. But that's it for this episode, and that's it for Downloaded. Thank you very much for watching, and hopefully we'll see you somewhere else.